Today we're looking at notes over domain and range. So let's first define what each of those mean. Domain is the set of all x values in a relation or function. The range is the set of all y values in a relation or function. So if it helps you to remember, first of all, D comes before R in the alphabet and X comes before Y in the alphabet. So D comes first, Y comes first, and R comes second and Y comes second. Or sometimes you see it written like this, to where domain is the X, like the X-axis, and range is up and down like the Y-axis, if that helps you remember. Okay. So let's look at some examples. I want you to look at these representations and state the domain and range of the given relation and determine whether or not it's a function. So review from yesterday. All right. So let's first look at the ordered pairs representation. So given this ordered pair, write the domain and range and define whether or not, or state whether or not it is a function. So remember, domain is just the x values, and in an ordered pair it goes x comma y. So it's not required, but it is definitely preferred, and for me and on my exam and work it will be required that when you list the domain and range, it goes in order from least to greatest. So that means here, least to greatest for domain for x, we'd start with -6. We get lucky on this one, it's in order. 1 is our next x value. 2 is our next x value. And 4 is our last x value. So that is our domain for this relation. Our range is all the y values. So we've got 5, 7, 10, and 8. On this one we weren't so lucky, it wasn't in order, so I would want you to rewrite it in order from least to greatest. So that would go 5, 7, 8, and then 10. That would be the correct way of writing that range. Okay, next step, determine whether or not it's a function. Well, let's look at those x values. We've got -6, 1, 2, and 4. Nothing repeats, so yes, it is a function. Nothing repeats. None of the x values repeat, excuse me. All right, let's look at this next set of ordered pairs. So looking at this next set of ordered pairs, let's define the domain and range first. So remember, x comma y is how it goes. So we've got, for our x values, for our domain, we've got 1, 3, -5, and 0. And remember, I want you to rewrite that in order from least to greatest. So that would go -5, 0, 1, and then 3. That would be the proper way. Okay, now for our range, we're looking for the y values, so that would be -4, 3, 8, and -4. Okay, so it is not necessary, and actually I don't want you to repeat numbers if they occur more than once. So when we rewrite this, we will go from least to greatest, and we will not repeat any values that are double or triple or so on. So it starts with -4, and you only have to write it once, then 3, and then 8. So that is our range. Let's again look at our x values, 1, 3, -5, and 0. None of those repeat, so yes, it is a function. All right. Let's move on to our next representation, which is tables. So looking at this table, we've got x values of -6, 0, -2, and 1. That is what is going to go for our domain. So since I've already got it written out nice and neat here, all in a line, I'm just going to take them in order from least to greatest. I've got -6, then -2, then 0, then 1. And for my range, my y values from least to greatest, -3, and again, I don't need to repeat it, then 4, then 5. All right, and again, to verify if it's a function, let's look at our x values. Nothing is repeated, so yes, it is a function. No x values repeat. All right, let's move on to our next representation. We've got mappings. So for our mapping, we've got x values -4, -1, 3, and 9. So for our domain, that's easy. It's nice and in order for us. For our range, the only two values we have are 6 and 8. And even though they're used a couple of times, or 8 is anyway, we only need to write it once. And looking at this mapping, yes, it's a function. I don't have two arrows coming off of one single number for x. So yes, it is a function. X isn't used more than once. All right, and last representation here, we have graphs. So when it comes to graphs on a coordinate grid, when we're looking at discrete data like this, points, it's easiest for the domain, the x values, to read from left to right. That would put it in order from least to greatest. So this point here has an x value of -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. That's the domain. Remember, domain is x. This point here has an x value of -1, -2, -3. This one has an x value of -2. This one has an x value of 0. This one has an x value of 2. And this last one has an x value of 3. For the range, remember I'm looking for y. So reading from bottom to top, these two coordinates have an a y value of -2. This coordinate has a y value of 1. This coordinate has a y value of 2. And these two coordinates have a y value of 3. And let's recall the vertical line test. If I draw vertical lines on all of these points, these vertical lines, none of them touch more than one point at any given time. So yes, it is a function. All right, last thing I want to talk about is sometimes you will be given a function written out like this, and you're given a domain, and you're asked to find the range. So if that's the case, I want you to remember that domain just means x and range means y. So what this is saying is take each of these domain values and plug them in for x to find out the y values. So you would have to do 3 different things here. You'd have to do -6, and for the first one, plug in -3 and then -3. For this second one here, you have to do -6, plug in 1, -3, and for the last one, you'd have to do -6, you're plugging in 4, -3, so then follow PEMDAS. -6 times -3 is 18, -3 is 15. Here, -6 times 1 is -6, and then bring down the -3, that's -9. -6 times 4 is -24. Bring down the -3 is -27. So writing this range in order from least to greatest, it would go -27, -9, +15. All right, I want you to jot this problem down real quick and try it on your own. Have a great night.